Hi, I'm Michael Kenihan. Thanks for joining me today over the power of the internet. I'm very pleased to present to you the fourth topic in our productivity series called Practice Growth. We've already completed 3 series, and this one should be interesting for you to get some good tips about how you can go about growing your practice. So really, what we're developing and talking about today is how you increase your practice billings or your individual practice billings and develop your clinical practice and your career at the same time. So again, it comes into that mode of clinically excellent and commercially successful that we've talked about many times already. Planning. I've spoken about this matter a little earlier in the slides, but I'm going to reinforce it again because most people don't understand the importance of having a plan. A good example would be nobody builds a house without first having a floor plan or a structural plan about how they're going to build the house. If they don't have that plan and they just go ahead willy-nilly, the chances of that house working well or the plumbing being right or the electrics not being a problem is very limited. So if you think about it that way, it's about planning not just your practice, but planning your career. And that's a topic really we talk about at another time. So what method will you use to make your plan? What objectives will they be? Will they be clear and well understood by you? How are you going to structure your activity? How are you going to use your time? Are you going to use the downtime when you don't have patients to actually work on your plan or implement your plan rather than going on social media or wasting time gossiping or other activities? And what level of a commitment are you going to show to action? At the end of the day, execution is everything. So it's okay to have a plan, but then you've got to work out how you're going to execute that plan. What process will you follow? We talk about form and substance. Form is the way you do it, but substance is what you do. So it's all very well to have a very good approach to how you do it, but if there's no substance to that, then it looks shallow and falls into the category I talked about of being productive yet not engaged. And that can be very easily seen by a patient in your practice. The measures have got to be relevant to you. They've got to work for you. So will they be what referrers have you got? What dollars per hour are you generating? How many patients will you see? There's a number that they can be, and they really have to work for you in your practice. When will you set them? When will you review them? Once again, it's not a set and forget process. It's very important to make sure that when you create the actual measure that you then look at what the time's going to be before you review that measure again. We developed a comprehensive document, which was a planning tool called Achieving Your Career Objectives. And this was a document that went not just into what your clinical objectives are, but what your commercial objectives are, what levels of risk you need to deal with, what your objectives administratively are going to be. And that really comes down to managing your time with your files, your notes, and your referrers and doing your letters and a whole range of activities that need to be done, how you'll go about doing them. And the final objective area we looked at was that of risk. How do you mitigate risk? Have you got your insurances up to date? Are you registered? Do you understand some of the policies around sexual harassment, for example? Because that's really changed over the years to being a lot of things people wouldn't have thought about, particularly in the digital area with videos and comments and things that one person thinks may be appropriate, another would think are inappropriate. Finally, measuring and counting what you do is really one of the key 8 habits of effective therapists. Measuring and counting means not just how many patients you saw, but what types of patients you saw. And how often are you going to review those KPIs that you set for your performance before. So all those elements come into a comprehensive plan for your practice. So the topics we're going to be dealing with in relation to practice growth are a number of different things, and some of them are from a little bit from left field, but I think it's important to incorporate these. So we're going to talk about the placebo effect. We're going to talk about persuasion and some work that I've seen in relation to that. The laws of growth. How to make advocates out of your patients by following the ladder of loyalty. What are the universal steps of selling? How we create messaging that's made to stick, or success messages. Relationship marketing, business development, what we call RMBD, and dealing with the issue of I've not studied marketing, or where do my patients come from the waiting room. which is a comment you often get when you ask practitioners that question. Talk about developing a marketing plan and what you need for that. And then we'll talk about branding and finally about resources. So let's jump into those topics right now. Why does the placebo effect matter? I think the placebo is much maligned. At the end of the day, everybody gets better through a combination of what physically happens to them and how they respond to that mentally and what their belief systems are. If you like, placebo adds that little bit extra in terms of compliance and belief that actually may be the tip that helps people recover some instances and not. It's actually more to do with where and who is administering the technique and what happens during that encounter than what is actually done to the patient. And we see this again and again and again. I'm not diminishing the effect of treatment. I'm just saying that the placebo is powerful. A medical dictionary going way, way back, several centuries, defined the placebo as calculated to amuse for a time rather than for any other purpose. So there's a couple of things that seem to enhance the effect of the placebo, and I think we should talk about these now. Because the placebo response seems to be enhanced when the practitioner is empathetic, is caring and understanding, is confident in his or her diagnosis, and provides optimistic assurance about recovery and promises mastery or control over the symptoms. Now, that's a big chunk of words there, and I think we need to break that down a little bit because obviously the first ones are about connecting through rapport and showing empathy. We've talked about showing empathy with feeling and focusing. And caring is really going the extra mile, going more than just the clinical experience. Understanding, which is about communication with the patient. Confidence in diagnosis is about expertise at the end of the day and understanding your anatomy and your biomechanics and how the body functions. Optimistic insurance is not about basically telling someone you're great and you can get them better. It's basically saying that I have a strong belief that we can get you better if we do the following things based on the diagnosis I've made. About control over the symptoms, oftentimes the reason that cognitive behavioural therapy works is because you're changing the person's frame or view about the pain that they're suffering. So therefore, don't ever think that that's lost on you, that whole process of the effect of the placebo. I'm not saying you go out and recruit that as your main tool, but it's certainly something that adds to what you do. And I asked this question when I've given this presentation about where did this set of slides come from? In actual fact, this came from a very long presentation I saw that was provided for me by a very highly regarded practitioner who works with work cover. And it was originally presented by a chiropractor, which is interesting because sometimes there are certain professions that may look at overplaying the placebo with some of the things that they do. But this was a very academic chiropractor who was trying to explain some of the non-clinical psychological things that happen in the consult. Some years ago, I was in a airport lounge. I picked up a magazine in the airport lounge and I found a very interesting book called Social Influence, Science and Practice by a guy called Robert Cialdini, who's subsequently written other books about influence. He's a social scientist. And he developed 6 principles that he talked about that I think relate very much to people in practice and explain some of the reasons why some people may be a little more successful in getting patients into their practice than others. So the 6 principles, I'll just highlight some of the points from each of them so that you can get a sense of where he was coming from in this book, but I do recommend that you look at reading it. Reciprocation. We feel obligated to return favours performed for us. And I'm going to give you an example for each of these in clinical practice in terms of referrers. Reciprocation might be that you go on a Tuesday night, every Tuesday night to a football club, and you go there to do a triage service for that football club's players. You arrive there and the players that are injured come in, you assess them and you advise them what they need to do. And you do this as a gratis or free service. It's something that I've done. There's a reciprocation from that club that says, he's coming and doing this for us. He's a professional. His practice is just down the road. We should reciprocate by encouraging our patients to come and see. So what happened was I would be in the consult, I'd be in the training room with the players and I'd say, right, Jack, you need to have a certain number of visits. I'm going to ring the clinic now and make you an appointment. And Julie would turn up. And from that engagement, that practice got somewhere between 5 and 7 patients every week, each of them appropriately referred. But making the impulse purchase for them while I was there, but also providing the reciprocation that the club president and the coach knew what I was doing, they also encouraged people to come. Authority. We look to experts to show us the way. How often do you see expert so-and-so said this? At the moment, when we're dealing in times like COVID, like we are now, epidemiologists are the authorities that come out and tell us all these different things. Authority can come in a number of different ways. Authority can come through lots of qualifications on your wall. Authority can come from a white jacket. Authority can come from testimonials or recommendations that have been made about to you. Authority can come in the manner in which you practice what you do. If you are seen as an authority, it gets back to that unique selling proposition as well. If you are known as someone that's good at treating a particular thing in a certain way, you will be able to leverage that using the principle of authority. And it is the reason why some practitioners wear a white coat, because they're seen to be more of an authority with a white coat and a name badge, which is what I used to do in my early years of practice, but has gone out of favour. Commitment, consistency. Generally speaking, we can't talk for everybody, of course, but generally people want to act consistently with their commitments and values. So therefore, there's a certain amount of goodwill that's captured by this issue of consistency and commitment. People will generally try and do the right thing. And this is a principle of persuasion that if you act consistently and you're there for consistent hours and you're committed to what you do and people address your values, they're more likely to come and see you. Scarcity is a very interesting concept as well. And this can be used in your practice to make sure that patients see that what they're getting is of greater value, because people want something that's scarce. And I give the example of if you go and see an orthopedic surgeon who's highly recommended to you and you can't get an appointment for 6 months, or it's a specialist neurologist or specialist whatever for that matter, you highly value that appointment because you assume, oh my God, he hasn't got many of appointments, and there's very few people cancel those appointments. So therefore, make the resource scarce. Make sure the receptionist doesn't say, oh, you can see Billy, he's basically got no appointments this afternoon or all day tomorrow. People will go, oh, well, I'll make an appointment. If I don't go, it doesn't really matter because there's plenty of other appointments. Whereas if you draw the person to say, oh, yes, I could probably squeeze you in with Billy at 4:15 tomorrow, you're going to think, oh, gosh, he's got a lot of appointments. I better make sure I turn up. So there's an example of that resource being scarce. This one stands to reason. I don't think we need the social science to teach us this. The more we like people, the more likely we are to say yes to them. Now, this is a tricky one because we can like people with sinister motives and sociopaths and the like, but generally speaking, most practitioners are likable people. Therefore, make yourself more likable, make yourself more easily approached, and people will go, oh, he's a good guy. And I often say to practitioners, if I lined up 10 practitioners and got them all to treat a particular patient and asked the patient to then assess who was the best, technically, they're more likely to say it was the person that they got the greatest rapport with because they're not very good at assessing people's clinical competence necessarily. The final area we want to talk about is social proof. And this is we look to what others do as a guide to behaviour, and was one of the biggest levers in the area of marketing. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. So a couple of examples of the social proof concept are around the notion of telemarketing. The lines are open and people are waiting for your call. Now, this was the line that was used in a telemarketing situation, and people thought, oh, well, the lines are open and they're waiting anyway. So they changed it to the lines are open and people are waiting for your call. If operators are busy, please call again. They give the sense from a social proof point that people are busy, that everybody's doing it and you're more likely to do it. The other one was the example of the towels you often seen in hotels. They'll have save the environment, please reuse this towel. And people go, oh yeah, okay, they don't even think about it. But if you use social proof to say the majority of guests at this hotel recycle their towels at least once during their stay, that resulted in these rooms 27% more likely to reuse. So people did what others were doing because most people, majority of guests, do the right thing. Most people are following and addressing the things that you have to do in a pandemic to get through a pandemic. Most people, it will encourage people to do it. So think about social proof when you're thinking about the things you do in relation to your own practice. The laws of growth. There's a number of these laws of growth, and if you like, laws is a bit of a play because they're not really laws, but they're really ways in which you can grow your patient list. And some of these revolve accumulating data. Others are acts that you need to do and take action to make sure that some of these things happen. So let's just unpack some of them over the next couple of minutes. So know who referred and how every new patient is referred to you. So this is the referrer tracker. Keep a record of who referred and how each patient got to you. Did they come to you from online? Were they referred by a friend? Digital referral, paper referral, whatever it was. Keep a record of all these referrers weekly, and that's when we talk about a document we've created called the referrer tracker. It's a simple document that keeps this data in place. The third one, persist when trying to gain a new referrer. I'll often say it may take 6 encounters to get referrals flowing. I know practitioners developing relationships with a GP, for example, have gone and visited the GP and got their face known at least to the GP, even if it was in the waiting room. They don't take a business card. They then go, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot my business card. They take the business card back. They then turn up another time and they drop off something about their practice, which is a note with their picture on it and what their areas of interest and expertise are, right? They still may not have had a referral. They then go and say, would you like me to send you my newsletter or my blog that I do on the particular area of interest I have? They send the blog. I think you're getting the point that you need to persist. And it's not just enough to say, oh, I sent a letter and nobody came. You need to follow up. You need to look at strategies in which you can get that engagement happening. So persist is the method there. Contact new referrers the same day by phone or letter. Always ask, were you referred today? And if no, how did you hear about us? Every practitioner, if you do nothing out of this session other than ask every patient that question, they won't mind. Were you referred? Oh, yes, you saw my friend Mary. Right, Mary. Good, I remember Mary. There's a point of contact there. How'd you hear about us? Oh, internet, referral. I saw your sign. This is all data that's important for you because it gives you feedback on where the patients are coming from. The next one really goes without saying, but satisfy your patients' needs beyond their expectations. Ask them about the things that are important to them and keep detail on. If their name's John Phillips and they like being called Jack, make a note that he likes being called Jack. Don't call him John and have him say, oh, I like being called Jack. You know when their birthday is, you've got their date of birth. Maybe you send those people a birthday card. Keep certain detail on file. These are ways that you can satisfy their need a little bit more. So the next slide really details the sort of things you want to have in a marketing plan. It sets out the number of things that we've got here. And I think I've just given you a few examples about how many new patients you wish to see. You need to start again with the end in mind. I wish to see 30 new patients a month. You need to decide. The gross billings you wish to generate each month. The gross billings, if you're in a practice and you're on a service agreement or facilities agreement or a contract and you get 40% or 50% of the fee, you know that for the fees you generate, you're only going to get 50%, which is fair because you're sharing it with the practice owner 50-50. You know you have to generate double those fees to get the number that you want. So if you want to earn 100,000, you're going to have to generate fees of 200,000 as an example. What do you want your fees to be? It's all very well saying, oh, I want to treat patients just for an hour. Well, if your fee's $50, the best you're ever going to do is probably less than 50 because not every appointment's full. So think about what you want your fee to be, your initial and your subsequent. Make a list of who your current referrers are and who the proposed referrers you will target in category and frequency. There's a principle called the Pareto principle that 80% of something comes from 20% of the activity to do it. 80% of your referrals will come from 20% of your referrers. Identify who the 20% are. They're the ones you want to focus on. Make sure you understand those principles. Work out what your communication channel is going to be. Some are very happy with a letter. Others like to liaise. They like to have a phone call. They like to see you, or they like to have extra information provided. Make a log of this. Keep this detail. This is very important to you. Similarly, Measure and record their referral habits. Keep a record of your contacts with them and look for the trends that you can get over time. I'll never forget, I used to be in a GP network, and I'd go to the GP practices, and there'd be a marketing rep for a pharmaceutical firm visiting the practice. And one day I went to this practice, and there's 2 GPs working in this practice in metropolitan Melbourne. And the rep came, and there was a cream for warts or something like that. I can't remember if it was warts. I think it was warts. And funnily enough, I'd been there a time before, and there'd been another rep coming, and they also had a cream for warts. And I said to the doctors after the visit, look, you had this one, you had that one. How do you assess the efficacy of those 2 creams? Oh, well, that's not very difficult. We used the product that came from the rep that brought us a particular type of food. It sounds trite and it sounds terrible, but decisions people make are often not made on the basis of what scientific benefit something may provide. Run to time and set the patient's expectations. If you do run late, make sure there's a way of providing that information to patients. And time more than 10 minutes is a deal. Up to 10 minutes is probably okay. We talked about placebo. Simple examples of that are smiling and a good greeting or good presentation of your treatment area. Don't forget they're part of the placebo. They're actually part of the awareness of the patient of what you're providing. Number 9, it is twice as easy to get an existing patient to return as to recruit a new patient. So make sure you foster potential leads from teams, friends, family of existing patients. Asking is often a good thing. Oh, what are you involved in? What networks are you involved in? Oh, I happen to be a coach of a girls' basketball team. Oh, okay, that's interesting. How do you manage the girls' injuries? Oh, well, we just do this or we do that. Would you like me to come down and help you? So use that patient to generate extra referrals for you. Foster the relationship with that patient, because that will become the source of your referrals into the future. Number 10, create the availability to see a referred patient as soon as the referrer wishes. Remember the impulse purchase. If you can't make the appointment for that person quickly, you may lose them to somewhere else. Liaise with reception to ensure this happens. Again, in your downtime, use your initiative. When not busy, nurture your referrers. 12, analyse your new patients. You should know what happened to each and every one of them. Do you? Should do this monthly. I had 30 new patients last week. What happened? I will guarantee you, on an average basis, you will forget 20% of those patients that don't come back. Patients drift off, they get forgotten, they cancel, you don't know they've cancelled, whatever the case may be. They change the appointment. Follow that up, because you're losing potentially 20% of your patients if you don't. We talked about developing your personal, unique selling proposition that you can use to market to new referrers. We've also talked about the 3 A's, availability, affability, and ability. Number 15, create a database of referrers in your area who work in large practices. That's one way, because then you're going to get better bang for your buck if you visit that practice and there's a lot of GPs there. Offer to present a summary of diagnosis about a patient. I remember talking to a GP who was in a corporate network who'd had a very busy practice, and he said, don't come along and just talk for 10 minutes. Come along if you're going to talk to a GP practice about the tips they should look for in shoulder pain that will make potential patient for you, because you can help them with that particular type. So you might say, you just do these 3 simple tests. Hand behind back, hand across the front, side abduction. If they have pain on those tests in a particular part of the shoulder, I can help them with my treatment. This doctor said 3 minutes of that with a GP is worth more than letters, more than lunches, the whole works, because they haven't got much time and you're helping them learn something, and then you can co-manage the patient with them. 16, follow up all patients that cancel or don't show. So you need to have systems in place in the practice that can identify these for you. At the end of the day, have someone say, look, this is person cancelled, this is their details. This one didn't show up, so you've got the detail. It's no harm done by ringing and saying, look, Mrs. So-and-so, I'm just ringing up because I noticed you weren't able to come today. I hope everything's all right. There's ways you can do that. 17, when you discharge a patient, tell them you will ring them in 2 weeks' time to check on their progress. If they expect your call, they are happier when you recall. And if they're having difficulties, they may rebook. And my examinations of this process show that roughly 1 in 5 patients will rebook after this call because they're not quite right. So you're actually gaining patients for your practice. Once you've established a good rapport with your patients, talk to them about their networks and who they may have, and they can provide leads. I mentioned that earlier. The last law that I think is really probably one of the more important, is a really good one, is the hook. A very well-known practitioner used to go and observe surgery with an orthopaedic surgeon who specialised in ankles. The surgeon, when he was doing his arthroscopies, had a little cuff that he used around the forefoot and the heel that somebody would use in the operating theatre to distract the ankle, to make it more open, to make the joint more open when he did his arthroscopy. The physio concerned said to the surgeon, "Oh, look, I use those cuffs, when I mobilise with my patients." Oh, well, what does that mean? He then described what he did. And the surgeon said, "Oh, well, could you use these? Do you need more?" He said, "Oh, yes, I'd love to have more." So every time the surgeon had an operation, he used to discard these cuffs, and it became what I call the hook. So every time the surgeon was using the hook, he thought of that practitioner, and that practitioner got more referrals because of that. Surgeons love having people in the operating theatre watching them. It's their stage. It's their opportunity to show their skill and their excellence. Don't be afraid. Myotherapists, do not be afraid to make contact with surgeons or assistants or people you know and ask if you can come and observe surgery. Very few people will say no. Obviously, at the moment, there's not much surgery being done. But in usual occasions, there's lots of opportunity to do that. So think about that, but also think about what's the hook for you. It may be that you have a particular topic. They may be a supporter of Richmond Football Club, for example, and they remember you because you're the keen person at Richmond and they love Richmond. It may even be that you send them a picture of the premiership photo or whatever. I'm talking about Richmond. I love Richmond. But the point is, whatever it is, try and find what is the hook for you. So, the ladder of loyalty. The ladder of loyalty is a concept that was introduced to me some time ago because it really indicates where people are on the ladder in terms of their involvement in your practice potentially. And people start off as being a suspect. And you think about yourself in this respect. You have an awareness. You have an awareness that this practice is there down the street, and it says that it's experienced in the treatment of sports injuries, and it's experienced in the area of lower limb management, and it's associated with the such and such football club. They have stated they've got an expertise. So you're a suspect. You're aware. You're only aware. Then you get an injury, okay? You're a prospect suddenly because they go, "Oh, gosh, I should go to that practice. They've got an expertise down there. I'm aware of them, but I've now noticed them, so I've got an interest." So you perceive that they've got a reputation. You're not sure, but suddenly you're a prospect because you're thinking of going there. So you then go and do a bit of research. You have a look online and you see this and you ask people and they go, "Oh, that's a good practice." So then you decide, "I'm going to go and see them." So you become a customer or a patient. You're involved. That's your level of interest. You're involved. Then all of a sudden, you've got an opportunity to discover if they've got a reputation, whether that reputation holds forward or not. Now, if they're happy with that reputation, they potentially become an advocate. They're committed. When they get injured, they'll come again. When their family get injured, they'll come. They'll tell people about you. They've developed a personal relationship with you. You know their stories. You know their families. The stories of a legend of people saying the whole community came to see this particular person. If you've got a network in a community and you have advocates, they'll refer all other people in that network to see you. So the ladder of loyalty works for you. It also explains why when people say to me, "Well, this person came to see our practice and they live around the corner, they never knew we were here." And I challenge people to say, "Do you know every business that's within a couple of kilometres of your house?" Only when you have a need do you know this. So when you have that become a prospect and you've got a need, suddenly your interest is increased. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about these sorts of matters. There are universal steps of selling that are really used in literally every business, from car sales to house sales and so on. I think it's always useful to actually talk about the steps of selling in the context of your consultation, because many of the aspects of what happens in a consultation fit into the process of selling. And particularly the last two steps, 7 and 8 on this script, because they're the things that often practitioners don't do and they really should. So preparation. What's preparation? Well, preparation is actually knowing what you've got. You've got a good clinic. You've prepared the room for the patient to come in. They're not coming into a dirty room. You've actually smiled at them when they first come. You've connected with them. You've shaken their hand. You've ushered them in. You've offered them a seat. You've looked after them, and you've done nothing else at the moment other than prepare. You've prepared the environment. You've prepared yourself. You've prepared them. Make sure you've got what you need in the room. That's part of preparation. Don't be running in and out of the room to get this or get that, or you haven't got a pen, or you haven't got the paper you want, or you haven't got the computer's not on. Whatever the case may be, prepare, prepare, prepare. Real estate terms, it's doing your research on what's in the area and what you know and who are the potential prospects you've got. So prepare is your first step. Building rapport is around how you first start the interaction with pleasantries and connection and communication and trying to find some common ground so you've actually got their attention right from the word go. You then start to ask them questions, right? Your questions in your subjective examination are about analysing their needs. So it may be clear right from the really early stages of the consult that you're having with that patient, their need today is to be reassured that they haven't got a fracture or they haven't got something that's sinister or it's not something that's really bad. And that may be because they've got something important the next day, they want to know if they can do it. So that process of questioning will establish what their need is for being there today. It may be their need is, I've just come from the surgeon, I've had an operation, I want to get my knee going again. Well, the need is to start getting the key processes in place to start moving ahead. So while you're analysing the needs, you're actually looking at what the solutions might be. You're developing solutions which may be, right, I've got to get to an effective diagnosis today as a solution. I've got to actually be able to tell this person whether they can or can't do A, B or C, or what they can do to get better. And then you start to move on to customising the benefit. Customising the benefit is, right, if you come and see this practice, if you come and see me again, these are the things that we'll be able to do. We'll be able to create the diagnosis. We've got all the equipment we need. In fact, I've even got imaging on site. I've actually got the right sort of tapes and bandages. We've got some braces. We've got some crutches. We've got some things here that can help you and benefit you with a particular condition you've got. We could even get the brace tonight, get you on crutches and get you back 2 days' time before the big event on the weekend. You're customising what the benefit will be. Then you're providing the treatment. You're giving them value. So you are providing an effective treatment modality, be it rubbing them or needling them or doing some functional work with them or some pain-reducing strategies or some activities of actually getting activation of muscle groups or stopping tight trigger points, etc. So you're actually starting to develop the value and they're feeling better, they're feeling relaxed and they're making a progress. So you've demonstrated your value. Then at the end, you're summarising the offer. Okay, today you've come in, we've done A, B, C and D, right? We're now going to get you to come back 3 times in the next week. This is what I want you to do with the exercises. You're to use the ice, you're to do this, you're to do that. You can use the crutches for one day with one leg, then with 2 legs, etc., etc. And then you're actually going down that process of summarising what's actually happened and what you've done and what the future offer is going to be with ongoing treatment. Then to close is to make sure, now do you understand this is what's wrong with you, this is what you need to do, this is what I can help you with, and now I want you to go and make an appointment to see me again. So following that process is a good way of making sure you maximise what happens in the consult. I read a book again. It's another book that I think is of value for you to read from the Heath brothers. It's a book called Made to Stick. And it's about making messages that stick, making messages that stay rather than messages that get lost. And a lot of the health messages don't go anywhere, they get lost. So he gave the example of what messages should be. They should be simple. They should be short and simple. They should be unexpected. So they should be something that, oh, gee, that's really, I didn't expect that. They should be concrete. They should be something that could have actually happened. They should be concise. They should have a beginning, a middle and an end. Emotional, and they should be a story. A great example of a story is the Great Kidney Heist. And this is an urban myth, but it was a story that was made. It's a story about somebody who remembers they go to a bar, they meet somebody at the bar, and they offer a drink by the person in the bar, and the next thing they know, they're in a bath of ice water they've woken up, they're freezing, they've got some sort of tube attached to their back leading to support them in some way, and there's a message there that's written there for them to see. And it says, everything is okay, you have been drugged, we have taken you away, we have harvested your kidney, and we've sewn you up, you're doing okay, and here's a number to ring for somebody to help you. Now, this was an urban myth, but it had all the elements of the story of being something that people could see and understand. So with the messages you create that you use for promotions, be they digitally or be they on the website or be they in your offering to patients, think about how some of these stories will go, and you'll know that I use stories in these presentations to help illustrate some of the points. Relationship marketing I've talked a bit about, so I won't labour the point on this, but at the end of the day, it's about developing relationships, and it's effectively achieved by mutual exchange and fulfilment of promise. Mutual means that both sides are a part of this. So there has to be a development of trust developed, has to be a development of customer satisfaction, value, effectively communicate with your rapport, have some social bonds, and actually develop a length of patronage. So actually be someone that goes to a practice for a period of time again and again and again. And these things lead to positive word of mouth reinforcement and are very, very important to try and develop. So relationship marketing, business development is a growth strategy. It's a way of getting your practice to increase its number of billings that it gets. It creates advocates. We've talked about that in the ladder of loyalty. It's a risk management strategy because it prevents negativity around your business because it's built on relationships rather than on hearsay. Remember why GPs refer to radiology. We've talked about that at some point. The question I get is, I'm not trained in marketing. I understand that. It's about relationship development. That's how you develop a service business. It's about people. If you've developed friendships with people or you've developed relationships over time with colleagues or people at uni or friends or family members, it's because you've developed a relationship with them. You've marketed yourself. You've sold yourself to them in a trite way of saying it. But the reality is the relationship development is the key to developing your practice because those relationships create advocates, it creates referrals, and it's satisfying for both the patient and for you. I talked about a more detailed marketing plan, but a simple marketing plan that you could look at is just to carry out these 4 simple tasks, to look at what your targets might be. So it might be you want to target 10 patients, new patients a week. A practice might want 30 new patients a week or a month or whatever the case may be. And your ideal patients that suit your brand and values, there is an exercise I can go through with you. We're not in this presentation, would come in further presentations down the line about what is your ideal patient. Identifying your ideal patient. It's someone who's got similar values as you, might even be a similar age group. It's the type of patients that you can develop rapport with and help get results too. So look at who your targets are going to be, first of all. Then you look and you say, what channels? Where do the people that do this hang out? Sports, if you want sports people, they hang out at sports clubs. You've got to be working with sports clubs. They hang out in teams. They hang out in group activities. They may do group activities. They may play golf. Being a member of a golf club might be good. They may go to a particular pub that they go to after training. That's a good place to develop the relationship with. They may follow a particular type of Facebook group. It's another way you can look at doing this. Think about what resources you need. Do you need some assistance to develop and build your brand? Do you need to have somebody help you with some of the elements of developing products and services that are attractive to these types of groups? Think about the resources you might need to have. Do you need certain equipment, etc.? And then look at your action. What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? Right? If you're going to do it, follow that execution plan. Don't just expect it to happen. You have to look at what, when, and how. So I encourage you to do those 3 things. I've talked about this before, and I'll talk about it very briefly again because I think it's worth really in the context of this presentation looking at. I talked about a physio who had been out for 6 years, who developed a fit-for-purpose letter writing, different for doctors, different for surgeons. He had a special interest, his unique selling proposition. He strived for clinical excellence, so he found himself a mentor. He had a good understanding of his target population, and he was established and found good networks of professionals that worked around him that he could refer to and could refer to him. Now that sounds simple, but that was his plan. He stuck at that plan. and he was a very successful young practitioner. So even if you just do the last couple of things I've suggested with a simple marketing plan, and you look at some of these strategies that will work with you, and you follow through and execute, these things will be successful for you as well. I'm not going to talk at length about the various branding possibilities that you could follow, but there's lots of personal opportunities. I recommend that LinkedIn is good for professional interactions. Facebook is good for linking with communities. Twitter is good if you've actually got something to say and of interest, and you are actually working in a particular area, or you're publishing videos, or you've got articles you published, or you've got items of information that you can provide. Not so much Google+, it's really become a negative of late for whatever reason, but really look at your personal branding. Make sure you've got a quality picture. They say it takes a fifth of a second to determine trust by looking at a photo. Don't have some crappy photo with bad lighting in a pub. Spend the money to get somebody to do some professional photographs for you. Your biography should have 3 parts. We'll talk about them in a moment, to use at different times. And the words that optimize your strengths. You need 3 key words about what you do. And it might be, I know a practitioner who worked very well on his LinkedIn. His words were sports physio, tendon, lower limb, Ashburton. He got people that referred to him because they were the search terms that they used. You need to think about what your keywords might be that describe you. You can have a longer brief, but your keywords, and in LinkedIn, as you know, there's a series of only about 10 words you can put in your bio about what you do. They're the keywords that get people's attention. I recommend Social Star. I can connect you with them if you like. They're fantastic for social media and branding. And Andy Ford has been a great person to work with. He's the brother of a well-known colleague of mine, so I recommend him to you. Just quickly on your personal branding, there's 3 parts to your personal branding. One is to understanding yourself and your practice, what your goals are, what your challenges are, the sort of things you want to achieve in your practice and in your life, and what you find are things that hold you back, what your strengths are. Your unique selling proposition fits in here, what your attributes are. You might be open all hours, you might work on weekends, you might do home visits, you might be available for online consultations. Let them know. And importantly, let them know your why. Why? Why do you want to do this? You want to do this because in a deep-seated way, for example, you've had injury problems yourself and you wanted to understand this, and because you'd worked through your own injuries and been successful, you wanted to help others. That could be your why. So think about your why. Part 2 is the building steps that you put into your profile, such as a photo, a tagline. We talked a bit about the tagline, how you're contacted, what your background of your bio is, the highlights of your background, what files you've got that could go with this, what sort of blogs and things do you able to do, what jobs are you looking for or you can recommend, what company associations do you have, what business associations do you have. And part 3 is really the nation of connections. Is everybody too many? I don't think so. But I think if you're going to get people as connections, connect with them. If you get an invite to connect, tell the person connecting what you do and how you may work. Ask them how you may work together. Look at relevant groups that fit your interests and your unique selling proposition. Don't join all these groups just for the sake of it. And if you're going to join a group, contribute to the group. And again, look at your content. It's all about content. So look at what blogs and vlogs you could develop. People like visuals, so video logs suit people sometimes better. If you're going to do a blog, make it regular. And I'm a victim of not doing this as regularly as I should. And I've made a commitment to do a new blog every month, which is a commitment that I've made. Just finally, just a couple of quick lessons in sales. And this has come from Mike Boyle from the Banjar Group, who's written a beautiful little book called Sales Cats I recommend to you. He talks about 9 quick points, keeping it simple, don't complicate it. If you make it too complicated, people will turn off. We've talked about having a plan. What is your uniqueness? What is your unique selling proposition? What's your unique sales proposition? Self-promote. Leave your business cards there. Blog. Put yourself out there. Be creative. Think about interesting little ideas you could do that might actually make you more attractive to the next person. Be inquisitive. Ask questions. Ask questions of everybody. Learn to fail well. In other words, when you do get a downer, don't just get back on the horse and start again. Don't get despondent about that. Be active. So you've got to be out in the community, developing networks, being involved with groups, and take responsibility by doing all of the other activities. So I think those elements will be useful for you to actually look at this from a sales perspective, which is more about one-on-one relationships than marketing, which is looking more broadband. So think about how you as an individual can look at your sales process in your practice. I always love this quote out of Alice in Wonderland because it really talks to the idea of a plan, which we just talked about there. And Alice asks the Mad Hatter, "Would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here?" The Hatter says, "Depends a good deal on where you want to go." Alice says, "I don't much care where." The Mad Hatter said, "It doesn't matter which way you go." So if you don't know where you want to get to, it doesn't matter which way you go. And therefore you can end up going round the circle. So let's bear that in mind when we talk about practice growth. Don't go round the circle. Be linear, be appropriate, do the things we've talked about in this presentation. So ultimately your objectives are pretty simple: to be clinically excellent and to be commercially successful. The two work hand in hand, and I encourage you to look at the commercial side very closely because often clinical performance is something that's as a given in your professional training. But you have to learn how to be commercially successful, and that will create a better lifestyle with you, with better balance, and you'll be able to do more of the things you want to do in your life if you manage to achieve the commercial success to go with your clinical excellence. And finally, my website is on the screen for you, michaelkenihan.com.au. My Twitter handle is @Michael A. Kenihan. LinkedIn, Michael Kenihan. Look at my website for offers of a 20-minute free consult available on the website. If you're interested in that, just send me an email and consider the consulting packages that might be available, either a one-on-one or one for your practice. Clerical staff, other staff, I'm happy to do those things under that basis of consulting. Thanks for listening today. I look forward to you joining me again at another presentation soon.